Bring in former House Speaker Republican Newt Gingrich, who worked with a Democratic President Bill Clinton to put into motion a balanced budget that led to something we haven't seen since, Newt, and that would be a budget surplus. All right, the dust from last night's historic and explosive vote is barely settling, Newt, but I want to get to the breaking news about Scalise and Jordan. Majority Leader Scalise, we know, very well liked, very solid. Jordan's known as a tough firebrand. I'm not going to ask you to choose, but does one have an advantage over the other? What are you hearing?
No, I don't know. I don't listen that carefully to what's going on, so I can't tell you. And I'm not sure anybody knows right now. Certainly Steve Scalise, who's very well liked, has the advantage of being the majority leader, and I think is probably more of the institutional leader. On the other hand, everybody recognizes that Jim Jordan is very tough, very conservative, has been remarkably effective as the Judiciary Committee chairman. And so the party, in part, has to kind of choose which style does it want. I think that Scalise would be pretty tough, but would be more inclined to a kind of reasonable tone. I think Jordan would be very aggressive and very prepared to take on Biden and to take on the Senate. So I think the House conference has to think through which one do they feel more comfortable with, both in getting through the rest of this Congress and which one can help them gain the 20 or 30 seats they need next year if they're going to be able to effectively govern, despite having an occasional eruption by people who are irresponsible.
Irresponsible, and last night you called Matt Gaetz and the 7 other Republicans who joined Democrats to vote out Speaker McCarthy. You called them traitors and said specifically they are actively destructive to the conservative movement, and that they should be primaried out, driven out of public life. I like people who take a stand, but do you care to sort of modify that or maybe walk any of it back? Or are you still standing firm on that?
It's pretty straightforward. Look, I'm a big fan of the University of Georgia, #1 team in the country. If they were playing Michigan or Alabama, and all of a sudden the offensive guard turned and tackled his own quarterback, what would you do with him? I mean, the fact is, for all of his ranting and raving, Gaetz sided with the Democratic Party. 96% of the House Republicans voted with McCarthy. 24 Republicans voted with McCarthy for every Republican who voted with Gaetz. And yet Gaetz had the arrogance, the moral certainty, the sense of superior patriotism that he was prepared to side with the Democrats. And that's what happened. They gave the Democrats the vote to beat McCarthy. Now, I don't know how that's an advantage if you're a Republican, and it doesn't strike me that those guys currently should be considered Republican. At a minimum, they should be required to sign a public pledge that they will not vote for anything like this for the rest of this Congress if they're going to be allowed back in the Republican conference. Otherwise, why have them in the room? If they reserve the right to destroy the room every time they're unhappy, there's no point in them being in the Republican conference.
Newt, we're barreling toward another government shutdown when the continuing resolution expires November 17th. How can any party govern with this weight of a sideshow going on that has definitely hurt the perception of the Republican Party among Republicans? Forget the Democrats.
Well, look, they can't. That's why in the end, after McCarthy brought up 2 very conservative continuing resolutions. One had an 8% cut, and people like Gaetz voted it down. Another had a 30% cut, plus it had the Republican bill for the border, for controlling the border, and Gaetz and his friends voted that down. By the way, the 19 Republicans who are in Biden districts, who are supposedly moderates, they all voted for these. They were prepared to stick with their party to pass very conservative, very spending cut, very border control bills, but not Gaetz and his friends. So I think in the worst case, the radicals will force the next speaker to do exactly what McCarthy did. To go to the Democrats and find a bipartisan agreement, because what you can't do is just have the whole government collapse because of 7 or 8 people.
One of Gaetz's friends, you talk about friends, is reportedly Donald Trump, who has been supportive. Troy Nils, the congressman from Texas, has said he will nominate Donald Trump for the speakership. Do you see, under any circumstance, that happening?
No. Look, that'd be silly. and Trump's not a silly man. The fact is, the person who's Speaker of the House has to be a member of the House for practical reasons, not because it's constitutionally required, but because you've got to listen to all your colleagues. This is not like being president where you appoint the cabinet and you fire it. In the House, you have 435 independently elected members. You have to earn 218 votes.
Okay.
You can't demand 218 votes. And I don't think any outsider could possibly be successful as Speaker. I just don't think it's possible.
Mr. Gingrich, great to have you. Thank you.